Tell me who you are, where you're from, a little bit about yourself, and go.
Sure. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm Jeremy, and I'm a runner from Colorado. I'm just a regular working guy. I have a regular job working for a website as a marketing analyst, and as much time as I possibly can, I spend running. I'm the father of 2 kids, and have a real nice family and home and everything here, and just really enjoy running, especially trail running, and most particularly 100-mile races.
Firstly, what got you into running? And then what attracted you to the longer distance trail running?
There's kind of a funny story about how I most recently got into running. I mean, as a kid, of course, I loved to run, and through elementary school, I really enjoyed running, and then once I got to middle school and high school, I'd stopped all sports and pretty much forgot about sports until I was 31 years old. And it was kind of a funny story. It was back in 2008, and I was kind of going through a difficult time professionally. I changed careers and changed jobs, and wasn't really happy with the decision I'd made, and found myself at a conference for a computer product that I was working on, and they had a 5K fun run, and I had never done a 5K or anything competitive in sports, probably since elementary school or so. But it was just a fun run, so I decided to enter it, and I didn't really do any training to speak of. I was just kind of remembering what it was that I did for training, and I basically went out where my kids were just babies, and we were pushing them in a stroller, and I would run out ahead of my wife for maybe 30, 50 yards or so until I got tired, and I'd come back and push the stroller for a little bit. Did that for a couple miles, and that was pretty much the extent of my training for my first race. But I went to the race, and it was funny when I think about how I ran it now, but I basically took off sprinting for as far as I could until I couldn't breathe anymore, and then I'd stop and walk. A bunch of people would pass me, and then I'd take off sprinting again, and then a bunch of people would pass me, and I did that, I don't know how many times, maybe 5 times I had to start walking to catch my breath in just a 5K race. And I ended up finishing, I don't know, I did pretty well, surprisingly. But I really enjoyed the feeling. I really enjoyed just being able to press myself up against my limits. And that was, I think, in actually November of 2008. And that's what got me thinking about, running as something that maybe I could get better at if I really focused on it. So it was a New Year's resolution for 2009. I remember deciding that I was just going to start running regularly as much as I could. And, of course, back then I was pretty unhealthy. I probably weighed 190 pounds. So I'm only 5'9", so I was getting plump, and I hadn't had any experience with running. I mean, after that 5K, I was walking around stiff for days. So it was a slow build-up process. It was literally maybe run a mile, maybe run 2 miles, and then up through the distances, half marathon, marathon, and so forth and so on. And every one was a real challenge, and every new distance I conquered, I felt like I had just I was on top of the world. I remember after the first half marathon, I was walking around with a crook in my back and limping for days. Now it's kind of funny to reflect on a half marathon's what I might do before I go to work in the morning and not think anything of it. But every distance just built on itself. It was 2009, so of course Born to Run had come out, and I read that. I can't remember if I'd signed up for the Leadville Marathon first or if I read the book first, but anyway, in the course of reading the book and signing up for the marathon, I learned about the ultra-distance racing, and just as is the case for me, I always had to keep pushing it and kind of see what that next thing would be, and made it up through the Leadville Marathon that summer, and went back to Leadville in August to see the finish of the 100-mile race, just to see what it was all about. And I think it was probably about 10 o'clock at night when the first runners started coming back in 2009. And I just remember being completely in awe, especially those front runners, just watching them come across the line. And I remember a few of them almost collapsing immediately and being taken to medical tents, and just being completely enamored with what it must have taken for them to be able to do that sort of thing. And on one level, I'm thinking, wow, I could never do that. And then somewhere in the back of your head, you're thinking, how am I going to do that?
Yeah.
So sure enough, and probably my wife could have told you that it was going to happen, but the next year, of course, we were there, and I was racing it. And she was pacing me. It was an amazing experience. But between the 2009 race and the 2010 race, I think I got a couple 100-mile races in. The first one I completed was the Bighorn 100 in the Bighorn Mountains in Wyoming, and boy, that was a heck of a race. I had originally tried to do the Moab 100 in March, and ended up having to drop out of that race because of just really uncontrollable chafing issues. Actually, I had no experience with that, and didn't know how to handle it, and consequently, just by mile 60 something, I was in just so much pain I couldn't even walk. So I've since learned about body glide, and that there's things that you need to do when you run 100 miles. But that was one of my first lessons, and 2 months later, went up to Bighorn, just determined that it was a real do or die sort of mentality that I had, that no matter what happened, I was going to keep going. And it really came down to that. It really came down to just a slog for the last 50 miles of just walking most of it. Ended up doing it 29 and a half hours. Probably the last 20 being my fastest, though, because I got so excited when I realized this was really going to happen for me, that I remember just coming blazing out of the mountains. And again, just completely elated. Just an amazing experience to be able to complete it. And that was really all I ever expected to accomplish. But as time went on, I kept doing 100-mile races as frequently as I could, and slowly building on them, and up until I guess 2012, when I started getting more competitive at it.
Going into 2012, you came to the Black Hills for the first time, the Black Hills, and you won the Black Hills 100 mile. 2012, you won 7 100 miles events out of running 9 of them. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So did you have a goal going into 2012 that is what you wanted to do? Give me a little bit about your mentality.
It was as much a surprise to me as anybody, really. I mean, I think it was just in the fall of 2011 at the Boulder 100, I had finally broken 24 hours. And, boy, at that point I'd probably run 800-mile races, and 24 hours is just kind of one of those goals that's out there for you that, but, wouldn't it be something if I could get under 24 hours? And then finally I did, and then going into 2012, all I wanted to try and do is, incrementally improve on that. One of the major shifts I made, though, is it was my 3rd year doing the Moab 100, which is a loop course. It's like a 7.5-mile loop on slick rock. You just kind of go out, up a big slope, and then back down. And it's a really punishing race on your feet. And again, kind of going back to the Born to Run thing, I sort of got indoctrinated in the minimalist shoe approach that I think a lot of us did in 2009. And I was usually running in like the New Balance 101s or any minimalist trail shoe. And I had seen Hoka's in 2011. I think I'd seen a couple people wearing them at the race, and of course, it's like, oh, what are those clown shoes? Foot coffins or whatever. And, but they made sense. The whole idea behind them made sense to me. So I decided, at least for the Moab race, because you're running on slick rock so much, I wanted to try them. Bought my first pair, did that race. I can't remember my exact time. I think it was 22 hours maybe. But I won the race wearing those, and I felt phenomenal after the race by comparison to all other races I'd done before. And then I actually had another race the following Saturday. That was another sort of thing I wanted to see if I could do, if I could run a 100-mile race on back-to-back weekends. And having won the first one was a total surprise. And then we drove from Moab down to Las Vegas so all through Utah with the family and camping. It was a great experience. But then ran another 100-mile race, which was the Coyote Springs race. Again, wearing my Hokas, and did that race in similar time, something like 22 hours, but it was also good enough for the win. And so you could just imagine, it was just, from expecting to be a mid to backpacker to winning 2 races in 1 week was just, I was on cloud 9. And it really changed my mentality a lot about, what I could do and what I was capable of and how quickly I could recover. So from there, it was just, those were both relatively small races, though, and so I didn't have any big ambitions of trying to break any major records or anything. And then from there, of course, I guess my next race was the Black Hills race, and of course that was a huge surprise for me to win that race in 2012. There's a lot of guys there who had much faster times at at all distances than I did, so I really didn't expect to be able to win that race. But it just seemed like I was on a real lucky streak. And after that, about a month later, I ran the Grand Mesa race, which was a really competitive race, and ended up winning that race. So at that point, I'd won 400-mile races in the first half of the year. When one of my friends had pointed out to me that the record at that point, which Carl Meltzer had set, like winning 600s in a year, and then from there I thought, well, that's just a few more, and was able to do that. Didn't win all of them. Tried really hard at the lean horse. I think I had at that time it was my 100-mile PR, but there were just some crazy fast guys from Hawaii there who did really good. And then let's see, I think I got the Boulder 100 after that, and the Houston 100 at the end of the year. So yeah, it was in that one I had to arrange to fly down to Houston by myself. Flew in on a Friday, flew out on a Sunday kind of thing. Just nothing but the goal of winning that race, and that was just a 2-mile cement loop in a park. And so it was pretty phenomenal. It takes a lot of agreement in your life if you're going to have a family and everybody support you. To get on board with that, one of the things I didn't mention actually in the start when I was talking about 2012 was that that Prince Edward Island crossing that we did. That was probably beyond the 700-mile wins. That was probably our big commitment to the year, which was my whole family went up to Canada and ran from one end of Prince Edward Island to the other, supporting me the whole way, because it was just kind of a solo attempt. It took 46 hours to cross the island, and I just had to have everybody on board for that. It was it was Natalie and the kids and my mom and my extended family and cousins, and it was just crazy to have everybody sort of get behind this just wacky idea I had. And when it was all finished, it was just a profoundly moving experience to me to have been able to just muster up all that support.
I saw some of those posts on there, on Facebook, and that was a long, and I think you briefly mentioned it to me.
I think I saw you the next week, actually, because I got back and I went up to the South Dakota race to Lean Horse.
Yeah, and you mentioned a little bit about that. Because what was that, like 200 and some?
It was 170 miles, 269 kilometers.
Just a lot of miles.
Yeah, sure.
Now, you set those goals like that. Do you just wake up one morning and go, "Hey, I want to do that"?
Yeah, well, with that one, it was actually because I wasn't going to be able to run Leadville that year, which I'd done the previous 2 years. And it's because we had a family reunion in Canada, and I thought, oh well, I'm in Canada, I should explore the trails, and then so I started researching trails in the area I was going to be, and of course discovered that there was this trail that happens to run from one end of the province to the other, and I started inquiring. I'm like, wow, I wonder how fast that's been done, and it turned out nobody had done it running yet. and I've met some people in the Roadrunners Club up there, and some people had ambitions to do it, but nobody had actually done it yet. So at that point, I thought, well, that's possible. I mean, people have done similar distances. So went ahead and and everybody, of course, my mom being the main one, just trying to convince me it was a completely crazy idea, and why don't I just do something more sensible? And the more people sort of said that sort of thing, the more I pushed back and said, no, I can do this, I can do this. And then by the time I finally persuaded everybody, it was far too late to turn back. And once the word went out to my extended family that was going to be in Canada, people started to rearrange their travel schedules so that they could be on Prince Edward Island for that weekend that I was going to be doing that. And anyway, it became a really tough race for me. About 100-mile run, I guess. About 100 miles into it, over 24 hours. I was feeling just horrible, just really, really bad. And but at that point, I was just too committed to the idea. Like, I had too firmly resolved that it was going to be done, that I just had to sort of surrender to that fact. And once I did so, it became a lot easier. Like, once I just accepted that it was almost like something out of my control, sort of something that I remember, not that I believe in fate or anything like that, but trying to accept it as though it were fate. And that sort of worked for me. That got me through the second 24 hours. So ended up finishing in, I think, 46 hours without sleeping. And had a lot of support along the way. I had one of my uncles, who's like 82 years old, was riding his bike along the trail next to me and carrying my water. He'd ride about half a mile, and I'd catch up with him and get some water. It was just an amazing experience. Natalie ran the last 50K with me through the night, and that was...
You talk about, for example, your mom saying, well, certain things are crazy, and obviously, I mean, that is a lot. Now, to give it perspective, when you were running your first 5K, if you were to know about these ultra distances, would you be able to know what sort of mentality you would have about these events?
Well, I thought the marathon was crazy, right? I mean, that seemed really lofty to me. It seemed like, I just didn't know that much about running. I didn't really know any runners or anything, and I thought that only, people on the level of professional athletes or something participated in marathons. And I remember after doing the 5K, one of my coworkers I was talking to him about how much fun it was, and he mentioned that his dad ran marathons. I was like, oh wow, your dad must be a super athlete. He must be phenomenally fit. And he's like, oh, no, he's a little overweight, and he's kind of average guy. I'm like, but you said he does marathons, and I couldn't reconcile that a regular person could do marathons. And I think that's about the time when it clicked for me that, like, well, if this guy's dad was probably 60 years old or something. I'm like, well, if, an average dad at 60 years old can run a marathon, then certainly if I dedicate myself to the sport, then I should be able to do it too. So I think it was about a 6-month period from not running at all to being able to do a marathon. And then once I got there, I think it was just a matter of setting my sights a little higher. Like I said, the first time watching the people finish Leadville, especially those front runners who were doing it in less than 24 hours, it seemed impossible, and clearly they were extreme athletes, but it's only a few more steps to get there too. So I don't know. I'm gonna keep pushing it. I hope 2014 can bring more PRs and better times, but at the same time, I don't want to get so locked into the always having to outdo myself mentality that I become unhappy with races that are still good races, but possibly not PR type races. So I think I have to remember to have different levels of goals to fall back on, and to be happy with any performance as long as I give it my best.
And what are some things that drive you during these events? Like, for example, in 2013, you broke the record for the Black Hills 100, again beating your old record. Now, when you go into these events, do you have the mentality, I just want to improve on past times, or is it your goal just to finish, or what sort of things drive you when you're on the course?
Well, with Black Hills specifically, I really wanted to try and win again. I mean, I knew again it was going to be a long shot. I knew again there were some really fast guys there that were going to put up a really good fight. And then in the end, I was really surprised that it wasn't the fast guys I had to be worried about, but a really fast girl. Casey was just amazing. She's incredible in that race, and I really am fueled by the competition. Though, had you asked me a couple years ago, whether I felt like I was competitive or not, I probably would have told you that no, I'm just out there challenging myself and racing against my own ability in my previous race times and things like that. And that's true, but when I find myself in a high up position in the race and I look over my shoulder and I see someone, that will make me run faster than looking at my watch and thinking, oh, I'm on pace to beat my last time or whatever. And I've done it enough times now that I know that my strongest performances have always been when there's somebody over my shoulder. So yeah, I thrive on that, and it's not a comfortable place to be necessarily. Sometimes you really wish you could just run your own race, but that's how you can really sort of push beyond yourself and beyond what you can do in training. Is when you're maybe you've been in the lead of a race for 80 miles, and then you see somebody trying to get in front of you, and it's like, oh, I've come too far to let that happen. And you can dig deep, and you can go a lot faster than you thought possible. So that was the case. Black Hills the first time for sure. And I think it was like maybe 36 miles into the race that I found myself in first place, and was able to hold on to that. But it was within the last 17 miles or whatever that John Horns was closing on me pretty well. But I'd come so far at that point that I was just going to have my body do whatever it had to do to win the race. And the very similar thing happened just last year when, in fact, I think it was the exact same aid station about 17 miles out or so, that as I was grabbing some food and water and stuff, that people started, hey, we can see their headlight coming, and it was Casey coming into the aid station right behind me. So for the last 17 miles, she was never more than a few minutes behind me, which is really something.
What are some of the things that you've brought, like skill sets that you've brought to these 100-mile events, and skills that you've learned from doing these events that carry over into your everyday life?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm still trying to work out for sure. I mean, I sort of, I guess, know what the skill set was that I brought into it with me, which is, sort of a mentality to be able to push myself really hard, and a desire to just apply a lot of will. And I guess one of the things that really attracts me to the sport in general, or sports in general, is that really a lot of it just comes down to sort of an act of will. Like, I wish in my professional life that I could go to work and just want to do well, and just the desire alone could somehow manifest itself into me doing really well at work and getting promoted and going forward. But the difficulty in other aspects of your life is you don't necessarily know what to do. Whereas with running, you sort of do know what to do. You just got to put one foot in front of the other and do it harder and try harder, and you'll do better. And sort of that realization, I guess, that I had maybe back at that first 5K that I was talking about, that this is really just an application of willpower and little else, and I have control over that. I don't have to worry about what other people think about me or anything like that. I can just apply myself. Was sort of an epiphany for me, and made me think, well, maybe this is something I can be good at, because the only thing standing between me and doing well at it is just trying really hard. And I felt like I could do that, and I think I'm still doing that and still trying to do that more and more. But the difficulty is, as with you run your first marathon, you think, wow, I can do anything now. But the problem is not that you don't have the will to be able to do anything, it's that you don't necessarily know what the right things are to do.
When you're in a race, you experience low points. When you did your first 100-mile race, was it just will that pushed you through those low points?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I think one of the really important things is to not let yourself focus on the things that are going wrong and try to get them out of your mind as quickly as you can. I mean, you do have to address them. For example, I mentioned on my very first attempt at 100, I ran into like kind of really bad chafing issues that I didn't know how to deal with, and all I was doing was focusing on the pain, and the more I thought about the pain, the harder it got, and it just sort of downward spiraled into this thing. But I think you just want to kind of address the issue as quickly as you can and get it out of your mind as quickly as you can, because it really is remarkable how much just keeping a good mentality or the right attitude does have to do with things. So you try and stay happy. I mean, you can run angry, but you can only run for so long angry. It's not really it doesn't really sustain you, because I know I've experimented with all sort of emotional states that I can manufacture to make myself run faster, like trying to run as if you were afraid, or run if you were angry or happy. And what I found is basically just kind of a positive place in your mind, whether or not you're winning a race or in the middle of the pack or the back of the pack. You just find reasons that you're running for, and think about those reasons, and try and stay positive, because it's the only way you can really sustain your energy, I think. I don't think you'd normally describe me as like a really happy-go-lucky sort of person, but in a race I can manufacture that emotion in myself. Plus, there really is nothing more enjoyable than being out running on trails with friends and in nature. And you just have to remind yourself of those parts, and not think about the blister on the bottom of your foot, or whatever physical ailments you're having.
You mentioned that you love trails and you love trail running.
Yeah.
Why?
Oh man. Well, I mean, really all you have to do is see it to experience it. But I guess one thing to always remember, or something I like to reflect on, is that really the perception of nature as being something really beautiful and profound is a completely internal experience, and it's actually one that you project onto nature, not that nature projects onto you. And so it's sort of your own responsibility to find beauty in nature. It's not actually there, but some places make it excessively easy to do that, and places like Leadville, once you get up above tree line and you can just see forever, and you can see all these big 14ers all around you. It's I don't know, it would take a pretty calloused person, I suppose, not to be really impressed by the grandeur of it, and the smells of nature, and the crispness of the air. And it's just it certainly beats running through a city, like with 20,000 other people. It's hard to even compare the two, really. And once you experience one, it's hard to imagine, like, why would I ever want to run the Denver Marathon again after experiencing this, what you can get from nature. That said, though, I'm going back to Boston again this year, because the Boston Marathon is just the coolest marathon out there, and that's a cluster. You're running shoulder to shoulder with people for 26 miles, just trying not to step on people's heels, basically. So night and day difference, but I love them all.
What would you like to say to someone that's interested in running even a marathon, or even the 50 or 100 mile, or even trail races? What would you like to say to someone who's interested in getting into the sport of ultra running?
I guess I would just encourage them to follow their passion and try it out, and start small, I guess, and local races and 5Ks and half marathons, and do some trail racing for sure. And hopefully it just feeds on itself. It's not something you should have to force. Just kind of a self-rewarding process. I mean, it's funny, I've been at this for 5 years now, almost every day, and it's still always the case that after you have a good workout the day before, your ankles kind of hurt and your knees hurt a little bit. And I have a hill that I walk up when I go to work, and if my ankles don't sort of hurt when I walk up the hill is when I, don't feel right. It's like I sort of thrive on that experience of that, being able to tell that I've run recently. and you've got to really enjoy that. You've got to like that feeling of being sore, because you're going to spend a lot of time that way, especially if you become an ultra runner. So I would just encourage people to do it if they like it.
That's good.
But I've been running with my daughter though. That's been awesome.
Yeah,
she's good. She's 8 years old now, and we've done a few 5Ks together and a 5-mile race. And, I mean, that's a ton of fun for me. So I really look forward to when she can pace me for hundreds, or vice versa. I think we'll be there sooner than later.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Probably a pretty good bonding experience too, to do that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's great. It's incredible. It's even more fun than running my own races, because all the pressure's off of me. I can just sit back and enjoy it, and she's intense. I love watching it.